I found a wooden canoe on Marketplace, which really is just a 2-person sea kayak. So I went and checked this thing out. Turned out the guy had just bought a house and he found this in the basement, put it on Marketplace for like 4 months. So I asked him, well, what's your bottom dollar? And he said he'd let it go. He wants it gone for $150. Problem was, it's 21 feet long and I got no way to carry it on any of our cars. So the only option is to use this little cargo bike that we got. And I know from just hauling things like my chubby little girls that the cargo bike can take at least 100 pounds of weight in the back. And so with a little dolly, I am able to throw this thing onto the back of the cargo bike with the front of the boat just tied on to the rack on the cargo bike. So that's a 21-foot trailer, pulling it through downtown all the way from Diamond Head. And then the next challenge is to get this on top of my car because I want to get it over the Pali so I can paddle around Kailua. The challenge is that these rabbits pretty much from the hood hinge all the way forward is hollow. I mean, it's just plastic, fairing, ground effects. There's nothing there that's solid. And then on the back, there's really nothing to tie down to. Like, if you look at this, there's nothing on top. And then if you go underneath, there's literally nothing except for the muffler, which I've tied off onto before. There's nothing else. I mean, look at that. So what I've developed is a system that, for one, I don't know if you can see it, the back pulls off of these hinges. So the most solid thing on this car are the hinges front and back. So that hinge, I don't know if you can see it, but I have welded these brackets that come up onto the back hinge. So that's on both sides. You pop the hood. And then here I've made these brackets come off of the hood hinge because literally everything else is pretty much hollow. Like even the main frame there isn't very strong. If you see, it literally turns into a tab. So I made these stainless brackets. You'll notice they go on top of the hinge bolt so it doesn't change the alignment of our hinges. And so the next challenge is to get a rack, because I tend to push my abilities or my weight requirements. So the challenge is dissipate a bunch of the weight on the hood of the car. So what I did to walk you guys through is I took cardboard and I made templates. There's the front template. When you flip this over, there's the back template. So that gives me my front and back, and it also gives me the camber on the edges. So you can see here, pretty much starting right there. So you can see here that I've done side templates and I've done the front and back template. So then that allows me to not only get the tilt to the bandsaw, but it allows me to cut the camber I want. With those cardboard templates now, I've made a 2x4 frame, essentially a stringer, that will now tie in the roof with closed cell foam. About 1 inch in the front, and that 1 inch goes into 1/2 inch because once I cut these with those templates, the wood actually sprung a little. But you'll notice that that literally wraps all the way around the car. And the key with that is that it ties in the roof now to carry a bunch of that weight. And that's key for knowing myself and how far I push things. So here's the completed TIG welded frame. It's aluminum, 6061 T6. You can actually see the marking there. And the way I designed it was, the main frame is 4 feet wide because I want to do sheets of plywood. 8 feet stops there. So it's another 2 feet, a little bit more. So almost over 10 feet long for a rack, which is huge when you consider this is a tiny little Volkswagen Rabbit. A couple design things. The round front is hopefully there to aerodynamically break the wind going down the freeway. These little outriggers here actually make up the distance between the 4-foot rack and the actual hinges on the Volkswagen that are a little bit wider at the base. Then we have these stringers here that tie in that wooden set of stringers on top of the car with the foam to this rack. And our little boot, I guess you'd call it, the roof boot, has been screwed together. Now it might make sense why these little recesses were cut, because that'll allow the straps to come through. The middle one is no big deal because you can run straps around this. But the end ones, you got the roof in the way, so these allow you to cut through on both sides. There's our little hook in the back. Let's throw it on. You'll see here that the strap, this is what ties into the hinge on the trunk, and this ties in both the wooden shoe and then the metal rack. So this kind of connects them, and then we also have a bunch of screws going through our aluminum frame into our wooden shoe. Next thing to attach it, which is pretty quick, is you have these little bolts. So the bolts go through, and then we have a little nut. And this is a nylon locking nut, but this doesn't have to be tight. I mean, you basically have to just get it to the point where the nylon locks, and then from there it won't loosen. So it is a bit of a challenge to get into this little flimsy part, but once I feel the nylon locking, I just leave it, because this is essentially just a pin. And so once that's on there, this is solid. The struts in the front were made by taking square stock aluminum. And so here you can actually see square stock aluminum. Turned the ID, it was going to go into the pipe, and then basically rounded the tops, rounded the back. And then with this one, you can see that I basically cut it down and then drilled the hole in it. And then for the actual struts, I then ran them into the tubing, used epoxy setting compound, and then riveted the ends. So that's why they're hollow inside. This one has a recess so that you can then tie in the next one, and it'll still be flush, so it clears down there, it clears the hood. So that's basically how these were made. Once the rack was in place, I could then put these guys onto the little bolts and then determine my lengths. And so that's how I got these lengths determined. So with struts in hand, the one that has non-recessed brackets goes on first. So we have our washer here. I usually leave the nuts on to protect my threads. Those are off. Washer on. First bracket, then washer, then the nut loose. That guy on, put our washer on, nylon lock nut, and then down here we have both brackets. You'll see this one has the recess, this one's flat. Washer, we'll put on the nut, and then we'll tighten it. This has to be kind of snug because this is
giving us the front strength, so that's snug. You'll notice lots of threads. I don't want to cut that, and so 3D printed this pretty sweet shaka. So that protects the nuts and keeps us Hawaiian style. Look at that. Yeah. What's really crucial about this rack now is it both ties these in to our frame on the car, which is connected to the hood hinges, but then this triangulation also prevents the rack from sliding forward. So this gives us double support and keeps us basically on track with the whole thing on the hood of the car. And there it is. Now we have triangulation both sides, full support. We've got a nice round bar in the front for aerodynamics, and then it goes into these square bars that allows us to throw stuff up. Here back is 8 feet. Anything farther forward is just for the really long stuff, which takes us to the sea kayak. All right, so this is where I kind of planned the back of the sea kayak resting on the car roof rack. Gives us about 4 feet to the end, which it's gonna barely fit in the garage. So that's my mark. And then again, I made another cardboard template. So from that template, I threw it onto a 4x4. So I cut out that side of the 4x4. And then basically, once that was on the boat, I then scribed the inside because this is a different angle going up the boat. And then once I got this scribed and planed, I then did a giant dado down the middle of the 4x4. You'll notice that this side is a little bit thinner here to here. So that's what goes forward. But if we put our mark and line it up, there it is. So now we're ready to chuck the boat on top. And there is our front block. And so basically same 4x4. This time the dado rounds with the tubing, and then little straps. These are stainless, lag in the front, and then a lag that then goes to a 1/4-20 threaded, and then I can use the little wing nuts to hand tighten or hand loosen and take it off. And so once that's been capped with closed cell foam, we actually have really good clearance. So we got about a, I don't know if you can see it, but about a 1/4 inch clearance there, 1/4 inch clearance there. And so that really sets it up. Probably the coolest thing about this rack though is you pop the pins and then you undo the nuts on the front, and then this whole thing is a nice sheet that you can just lean on the side of the garage out of the way. So when you don't need it, pull it off the car and store it. So now we can see what else we can haul.